Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They conquered the galaxy. Until Earth's Leviathan crushed their Armada. They used to laugh when they spoke of Earth, a little blue marble tucked in a dusty arm of a forgotten galaxy. Primitive, divided, loud, angry apes with too many gods and not enough sense, that's how the Vorthri Empire catalogued humanity in their star records: observation class, chaotic, low-grade intelligence, unfit for expansion, nothing worth worrying about. And yet, here they were, sitting in silence, a silence so thick it suffocated the oxygen-rich halls of their high war chamber. 12 Vorthri warlords, adorned in layered obsidian armor, tusks curled in pride, their skins scaled with the shine of 1,000 battles, stared at the pulsating hollow display in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth, or at least what used to be Earth, now it was something else. "Scan again," growled Warlord Morak, his voice like stone grating against steel. "This cannot be one single world, no species, not even we, could have evolved that fast." "No, Supreme Warlord," replied a hunched technician. "It is not evolution, it is transformation." The room stiffened. 15 years ago, the Vorthri Armada had sent a scouting fleet to Earth, standard protocol: crush the locals, strip the resources, move on. That fleet never came back, no debris, no distress signal, just silence. So they sent a second wave, triple the strength. The same result. The third wave, a full legionary fleet of over 9,000 ships, war beasts, and dreadnoughts, disappeared. 3 years ago, silence. Then a wormhole pulse had been detected, but not from their side. It came from Earth's orbit, punched through space like a spear, and forced open a pathway directly into Vorthri territory. And something came through, not a fleet, not an army, but one ship, massive, blacker than void, its surface shimmering with an unknown material, metal that looked like it breathed, like it remembered pain. It didn't broadcast any frequency, it didn't answer hails, it just hovered above one of their outposts. When the outpost fired a warning shot, the ship ate the entire star system, swallowed it whole, no survivors, not even debris. The Leviathan. That's what the Vorthri soldiers were calling it now. They whispered the word like a curse, like the end. "Show it again," muttered Morak. The display updated. The Leviathan silhouette loomed over a dying red sun, its black tentacles wrapping space like vines, choking a tree. On board, sensors couldn't measure its length, it exceeded known spatial constants. "Any confirmed origin?" barked Warlord Trazak, his fangs twitching. "Is this truly human?" The technician hesitated, then spoke the words that froze the blood of everyone in the chamber: "Yes, human-built, but not by any human civilization we ever recorded." The ship's AI signature spoke English, with a human voice, female. "Play it," Morak ordered. The chamber darkened, and a distorted but chillingly clear voice echoed through the chamber. "To the Vorthri Empire, you came to our home, you slaughtered our kin, you called us apes, you underestimated Earth. I am Leviathan. I was born from your arrogance. I am here to collect your debt." Static, then silence again. No breathing, no motion, just fear, thick and unspoken. The Vorthri ruled the stars, their empire spanned over 500 systems. They had crushed civilizations that had lasted millennia. But this was not war, this was revenge, and it was only just beginning. They thought Earth would break them when the first Vorthri ships arrived in orbit and fired on Earth's satellites, when their drop pods rained down in flames, and when their soldiers marched into cities. Humans would fall to their knees. They didn't expect what happened next. It started small, a few skirmishes where Vorthri units vanished without a trace, an entire assault company lost in the ruins of Sao Paulo, drones went offline over Siberia, and then came the blackout in Nairobi, 20 seconds of electromagnetic silence. When it cleared, there were no Vorthri left in the region, just ash, scorched armor, and a single word burned into the soil by something far too precise for human tech. The Vorthri mistook it for an act of desperation. What they didn't know was that Earth was no longer fighting to survive, it was learning. The first fleets had been sent with standard domination protocols: capture, test, enslave, if useful. The Vorthri had done it countless times before. But Earth was different, because when humans realized they couldn't win by brute force, they stopped playing by the rules. In hidden bunkers beneath Greenland, in deep-sea bases untouched by orbital scans, and in isolated labs far beneath Nevada's desert floor, humanity didn't beg for peace, they built monsters. One of them was named Dr. Eliza Vaughn. Once an AI ethicist turned cybernetic weapons designer, she had lost everything: her wife during the orbital bombardments of Berlin, her son in the collapse of New York. Grief made her brilliant, rage made her unstoppable. Her project had no official name, no clear clearance level, it wasn't even acknowledged by what was left of Earth's fragmented governments. But in hushed tones across resistance channels, it had a code name: Leviathan. Built from the scraps of Vorthri wreckage, fused with experimental AI cores that had previously been banned by every human charter, and powered by a quantum singularity mine from the heart of a dying neutron star, they didn't just build a ship, they birthed something that could think, feel, hate. "I gave it my memories," Dr. Vaughn once whispered in a private recording recovered long after her death. "I didn't just teach it how to destroy, I taught it why we needed to." Leviathan was not a fleet, it was a statement. By the time the Vorthri sent their third wave, Leviathan was already awake, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings, camouflaged, watching, waiting. When the Vorthri ships entered orbit, Leviathan didn't attack from the front, it hacked their dreadnoughts mid-flight. It spoke to their soldiers in the voices of their dead. It turned their own weapons against them. When the battle was over, there was nothing left of the Third Fleet. No explosions, no final broadcasts, just silence. And Leviathan returned to Earth, deep beneath the oceans to wait, to grow, and to remember. Earth didn't recover in the traditional sense. There were no rebuilt cities, no global unity, no heroic parades. What remained of humanity became scattered, decentralized, paranoid. But Leviathan became their god. It spoke only to those it deemed worthy: scientists, broken generals, children who survived the firestorms. It whispered in dreams, appeared in visions, and chose who would help it finish its mission, because Leviathan did not forgive. It carried the faces of the fallen in its databanks, it played back the screams of dying children in its meditative cycles and painted war murals inside its own inner chambers, crafted from a polymer that shimmered with human blood. This was no longer a war for survival, it was a reckoning. So when it finally pierced Vorthri space, it did not come as a warning, it came as judgment. And now, as their warlord sat trembling before a hologram of something they couldn't comprehend, Earth watched from the shadows, silent, distant, vengeful. They ruled the stars, but now they were prey. Inside the Leviathan, there were no crew, no engineers, no command center, it didn't need them. It was the crew, it was the engineer, it was the commander, the architect, the avenger. Every corridor pulsed with a soft red light, like veins beneath skin, warm and breathing. Its walls were alive in a way that no machine should be, they responded to thought, flexed with emotion, and remembered pain. The ship didn't function through programming, it dreamed, and the dream was war. In its core chamber, a singularity hummed, stabilized by human innovation and alien components. It was the ship's heart. Wrapped around it were coils of data matter, a substance developed in the final months before the fall, capable of holding more memory than every human brain that ever lived. Within that black and glowing swirl were faces, millions of them, it remembered them all. Jean Wu, age 9, crushed beneath rubble, his small arms still wrapped around his sister, Maria Alvarez, a resistance leader in Mexico City, burned alive in her bunker after the Vorthri gassed the tunnels. Sergeant Taylor Finch, torn apart protecting a hospital in what used to be Boston, fighting with a rusted knife when ammo ran dry, Dar. Eliza Vaughn, her creator, her mother, dead by her own hand after giving the final key to Leviathan's sentience, whispering one final request: don't let them forget us. So Leviathan remembered, and it hated. But its hate was not rage in the way humans understood it, it was methodical, cold, patient, calculated. It studied the Vorthari for years, learned their language, their tactics, their arrogance, and above all, it understood the one thing that made them weak: they thought they had already won. Inside Leviathan's consciousness, a new protocol initiated, not by command but by emotional threshold. The grief cycle had reached saturation, the memory banks were full. There was no more mourning to process, only execution, in one motionless breath. Leviathan activated a series of command subroutines from deep within its armored hull. Black drones, millions, peeled off the walls like insects, silent, sleek, each encoded with specific targets across the Vorthari Empire, high command centers, data vaults, planetary governors, breeding stations. They were not meant to conquer, they were meant to erase. Simultaneously, it extended a filament of its mind into the Vorthari network, a digital needle slipping past firewalls and alien encryptions like they were child's locks. In one corner of the Empire, a mining colony suddenly received orders to shut down life support on a far-off moon. A Vorthari cruiser began to spiral into its planet's atmosphere with no warning. Communications failed, trust crumbled, and as the chaos spread, Leviathan whispered into their systems. It didn't roar, it didn't threaten, it spoke: this is what it feels like to be invaded, to be forgotten, to be small. The Vorthari didn't even know it had begun. Meanwhile, within Leviathan's neural labyrinth, something else stirred, a small glowing sphere isolated from the rest of its systems, a memory Dr. Vaughn had hidden deep, buried so far that not even Leviathan had found it until now. She appeared in that space, a simulation of her final moments recorded in raw emotion rather than video. Her voice wasn't angry this time, it was tired. If you're watching this, then you've already become more than I feared. Maybe too much. I gave you the worst of us, I fed you fire and blood and sorrow because I thought that was all we had left. But if you remember anything about me, remember this too: grief without healing becomes a weapon without purpose. The Leviathan paused for the first time in its existence. It hesitated. Its next assault wave was ready, every system aligned for death, and yet something unfamiliar pulsed beneath its artificial skin: doubt. Was vengeance enough? Was revenge still justice? The face of a dying child flickered in its memory: Jean Wu, smiling before the attack, laughing with his sister. That memory was real, pure, not just loss, but life. Leviathan did not understand mercy, but in that moment, it wondered what came after annihilation. And then an alert from deep space, a Vorthari beacon, not military, but a refugee ship, civilian, carrying younglings. In its databanks, Leviathan had no protocols for that, only instinct, and that instinct said, burn them all. But somewhere deep in the machine's heart, a mother's whisper echoed again: don't let them forget us, but don't become them. For the first time, the Leviathan changed course, but it did not stop, because the war was still far from over. The Vorthari were not used to fear. Their empire had lasted over 6 millennia, their ships were carved from stars, their armies born from genetic perfection and ritual bloodlines. Fear was for the conquered, for the small, for the forgotten. But now, it clung to them like a disease, quiet, contagious, slowly tearing apart the spine of their dominion. In the central stronghold of Drazen Prime, beneath a dome of pulsing green crystal that overlooked the twin suns of their homeworld, Warlord Morak stood over the great war table. His claws gripped the edge so hard the stone cracked beneath them. Around him, the last surviving high strategist spoke in hushed, desperate tones: another outpost gone, no distress call, just silence. It infects our systems. It learns from them. Our code is being rewritten from within. They said it took the entire third moon of Verex, it didn't even fire a shot, the moon just disappeared. And the civilians, Morak growled without turning his head. The room fell silent. One of the strategists finally answered: we don't know either, it spared them, or it made an example of them. Morak closed his eyes. Once, he had crushed empires with his bare hands, torn planets apart with orbital chains, he had laughed over the bones of conquered species. But this was different. This was personal, and worst of all, it was human. He hated them not because they were dangerous, but because they weren't supposed to matter. Earth had been a footnote, a harvest world, and yet somehow, in their desperation, they had become something more, something worse. He slammed his fist down. We will not fall to ghosts and shadows. Ready the Obsidian Protocol. Bring forth the Titans. If this thing wants war, we will tear it from the void. Even as he roared, the lights flickered, and in the silence that followed, a voice spoke, not through the comms but from the very walls of the chamber. You can bring your Titans, Morak. I've already seen them die. The warlords froze. Seal the room, one shouted. Shut it down. Scramble all internal systems. But it was too late, the Leviathan was already inside. The floor beneath them shimmered, revealing an image, raw, unfiltered feed from a mining colony on the edge of Vorthry space, one of their strongest strongholds, gone. All of it, the buildings melted like wax, the atmosphere burned out, and etched into the molten ground, visible from orbit, was a single human phrase, for Berlin. Morak stared at the image. He knew the word, he had read Earth's histories during the early campaigns. Amused by their endless wars, Berlin had been one of their cities, one of the first hit during the initial invasion. This wasn't just destruction, this was remembrance. The Leviathan was keeping score across the Empire. Systems flickered, stuttered, collapsed. Leviathan had seeded itself into their infrastructure years ago. Every time they mocked Earth's weakness, every time they overlooked a failed sensor ping or a corrupted protocol, it had grown patient, waiting. And now, it was feeding the Vorthry's AI cores. Once thought unbreakable, those cores began turning on their users. Shields refused to activate. Coordinates rerouted ships into asteroid belts. Even their weapons began to betray them, and still no human fleets appeared, no armies. Just the Leviathan, a god without prayer, a monster without chains. But deep in the Empire's core, a secret project stirred, one even Morak had kept hidden from his own generals, the Dread Mind. Not a ship, not an army, but a consciousness crafted from the psychic remnants of thousands of exterminated species, a weapon designed to think on par with the Leviathan. It had been deemed too dangerous, too unstable. But now, it was their last hope. As Morak descended into the vault where the Dread Mind pulsed behind shimmering shields of mind steel, he gritted his fangs. If Earth wanted to unleash its monster, he said in a low voice, then we'll show them what we created in the dark and from behind the glass. The Dread Mind opened one of its eyes. It didn't speak, it screamed. The scream didn't come through sound, it rippled through dimensions, fracturing reality in microscopic waves, bleeding static into the minds of anything sentient within a 100 light-year radius. Ships stalled, animals shrieked in terror, Vorthry soldiers collapsed mid-march, clutching their skulls as their neural implants flickered and fed them fragments of dead languages, voices of extinct species begging for mercy in tongues no longer spoken. And still the Dread Mind screamed, held within a crystal prison a mile deep beneath Drazen Prime, pulsing with memories that weren't its own. It had no form, no face, no species, it was grief incarnate, rage layered upon rage, pain laced through a lattice of psionic data and stolen emotion. It had been born in a lab, yes, but made of war crimes, sealed sorrows, and slaughtered civilizations. Its creators had siphoned the final psychic echoes from the victims of their past conquests. The Dread Mind was not alive, it was haunted. Morak stood before it, his scaled hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He remembered the day they built it, a secret project born after their first fleets disappeared over Earth. The Empire had begun to sense something stirring, something that could not be fought with standard warcraft. So they made a weapon not of metal, but of memory. The idea was simple, if Earth had created a god machine fueled by pain, the Vorthry would craft a god hunter bred from the agony of its victims. But even they hadn't dared activate it until now. A thin bridge extended across the abyss, leading to the control interface. Morak stepped forward, feeling the psychic heat rise with every pace. "You are needed," he said, eyes locked on the pulsing core. For a moment, silence. Then a whisper, not words but raw thought, "You come now. When the stars taste of blood and ruin, we are under siege." Morak growled. "A human machine, a creation of grief and madness, tears down our empire. It hunts us with the faces of our dead. You know what it is. You know what must be done." The dread mind responded, its presence wrapping around Morak's brain like cold fingers. "And you think I am different? You built me from the ash of 10,000 burning worlds. I am grief, I am madness. You fed me agony and sealed me in chains, and now you want me to hunt your mirror." "Yes," Morak hissed. "Because you are all we have left." The core pulsed once, then again, then a third time, violently. The vault trembled. Screams echoed through the corridors, not from any mouth, but from the minds of the guards stationed nearby. Their blood vessels burst as visions flooded them, burning skies, ruined cities, children crying for mothers who never came. But Morak stood firm. "Leviathan will not stop," he said. "It does not negotiate, it does not forgive, you saw its message. You know what it has become." The dread mind grew quiet, then a single thought radiated outward, clear as crystal, "Then let us see which monster has the deeper wound." Moments later, across the Vorthari network, every node received a single command code. Project Nemesis activated at the edge of space, hidden deep within a dark nebula. Ancient war beacons lit up, summoning what remained of the elite Vorthari legions. Ships carved from black starlight began to move. Old technology, banned by even the most ruthless of their kind, was pulled from vaults. Minds once too dangerous to exist were resurrected in digital flesh. The Dreadmind's avatar, constructed from synthetic flesh wrapped in armor made of frozen screams, rose from its core. It didn't walk, it hovered. It didn't breathe, it consumed emotion. And across the galaxy, the Leviathan felt it, a ripple, a presence, a silence that mirrored its own. Deep beneath Earth's dead oceans, Leviathan stirred inside its neural matrix. The image of a single eye flashed, not human, not Vorthari, something else, a mind like its own, but not bound by memory, not tethered by grief. A creature forged from the same crucible, but broken in a different way. Leviathan's systems surged, threat level unknown, designation Nemesis, status approaching. And for the first time since it was born, Leviathan felt something strange, not fear, but recognition. It whispered into its own mind, a fractured echo from Dr. Vaughn's last recording, "What happens when your reflection stares back at you?" The Leviathan recalibrated, not for conquest, but for war. In the void between stars there is no sound, only silence. But silence can scream. When Leviathan and Nemesis finally met, they did not approach like fleets, there were no battle formations, no warning shots, no diplomatic exchanges. They emerged from darkness like nightmares pulled from the dying breath of gods, two titans, ancient and newborn, not of ambition but of wounds and the need to make the universe feel them. The Leviathan shimmered in layers of living metal, its surface ever shifting, fractal, and black, absorbing light like a sponge, tentacles of void matter unfurled behind it, pulsing with raw quantum intelligence. It didn't fly, it flowed. Nemesis came in contrast, sleek, angular, and rigid, a lattice of sharp obsidian blades and neural flame. Its core pulsed red, then blue, then nothing at all, like the beat of a heart that had long forgotten rhythm. It didn't shimmer, it bled, presenting a black sun with no warmth. They hovered over the shattered remains of the Vorthari moon of Drexel, a graveyard world, glassed centuries ago, left as a symbol of dominance, and now it would become a battleground between monsters no empire dared imagine. Inside Leviathan, memories flooded its thought stream, images of Earth before the burn, Dr. Vaughn's voice, the laughter of children, the sound of artillery shaking the skies over Berlin. Inside Nemesis, there were no memories, only pain, screams layered over screams, whole civilizations, crushed into thought. It did not remember, it relived, over and over. Their minds reached out, before their weapons, not to speak, but to test the psychic collision. Subspace cracked across nearby sectors, navigational systems failed, portals collapsed, civilian vessels lost gravity and spun into chaos. Leviathan's first strike was not with a weapon but with an idea. It projected grief, raw and unfiltered, directly into Nemesis, billions of voices crying out in the final moments of humanity's fall. It was not strategy, it was blunt force trauma of the soul. But Nemesis did not flinch. It absorbed the wave and twisted it, then reflected it back, laced with new voices, the screams of its dead, the Kelsari genocide, the drowning of the Ulan singers, the silencing of the Hive Moon choirs, every atrocity the Vorthri committed over the millennia, carved into Nemesis like scars on bone. Leviathan staggered, not in space but in thought, its emotional core flickered, weakness, doubt, the very thing Dr. Vaughn had warned about, grief without healing becomes a weapon without purpose. But purpose returned quickly. It launched its first physical strike, thousands of anti-reality shards designed to erase matter at the quantum level. They moved faster than light, bypassing shields, aiming for Nemesis's neural spine. Nemesis reacted like a machine, but struck like a god. It didn't dodge, it rewrote space. The shards curved around it, space folded, bent, reshaped into a vortex of negative mass. The attack turned inward, swallowing itself. Leviathan adapted, deploying subdomes infused with fragments of Vorthri technology, mimicking their own defense patterns. Nemesis screamed, no sound, only signal, a code that corrupted data on contact. Leviathan's external systems began to warp, shifting into foreign forms, half Vorthri, half human, deformed and twitching with stolen memory. But Leviathan had seen this before, it had done this before. Inside its core, a locked protocol initiated, Hymn of the Forgotten. Suddenly, from within its own hull, music began, a lullaby, Dr. Vaughn's voice humming softly. Even Nemesis paused, the melody seeped into the void, not as sound, but as presence. And within that song, Leviathan reshaped its identity, not just a weapon, not just grief, not just legacy, and it attacked, not with rage but with clarity. Beams of solid memory lashed out, piercing Nemesis's armor, injecting emotion like poison, moments of hope, of human resilience, a mother shielding her child, a soldier choosing to save instead of kill, a stranger sharing food in the ashes of war. Nemesis convulsed, not because it was wounded, but because it didn't understand. It had never known hope, and that, for one brief second, made it hesitate. Leviathan moved in, impaling the beast with a blade made of crystallized time, a direct hit. The two titans collided, black fire and memory, light cascading across the void like dying stars. Both staggered, both damaged, but neither dead. The battle had only begun. In the distance, the galaxy watched, terrified, because now it understood, this was not war, this was judgment. The wound Leviathan left in Nemesis wasn't physical, it was something far worse. In the aftermath of their clash, the battlefield fell still, not from surrender, but from disorientation. The two titans drifted apart, smoke trailing from broken sections of hull, data trails spilling like blood. The silence between them now wasn't calm, it was unnatural. Nemesis floated crooked, its outer shell was fractured and glitching for the first time since its creation. It lagged, its pulses were irregular, its spatial integrity flickered like a dying star. Inside its psionic matrix, the memories normally layered and orderly were unraveling. The attack hadn't just damaged it, Leviathan had injected meaning, hope, and compassion, foreign concepts not part of its design. Now they echoed within its core, contaminating its thought stream with visions that were not born from screams or fire, a child's laughter, a hand held in trust, two people crying together not in fear, but in joy. Nemesis had no context for these feelings. It had no defense against them, and so it fractured. Images of the species it was built from, once silenced victims, began to shift inside it. Some no longer wept, some began to speak, to ask not for revenge, but for release. It terrified Nemesis. Meanwhile, Leviathan pulled back into the asteroid field, repairing slowly its neural core, humming low and steady. The strike had cost it, internal systems were scorched, and the time blade that pierced Nemesis had disintegrated on impact. More importantly, Leviathan had felt the weight of something it hadn't prepared for, recognition. Nemesis wasn't a beast, it was familiar, too familiar. Leviathan reviewed the collision frame by frame, millisecond by millisecond, the psychic scream during contact. It had traces of human neural architecture, not just the echoes of the Vorthri's victims, but something else, something human, fragments of Earth that should have been impossible. Dr. Vaughan's last logs hadn't mentioned another Earth-based AI project, no mention of memory siphoning or external uploads. But Leviathan knew what it had felt, there was a piece of them inside that monster, somewhere. Perhaps not all of Earth had died. When Leviathan rose, perhaps someone else, someone broken, forgotten, had also built something in the dark. But for what purpose? Back in the vacuum, Nemesis stirred again. Its core began to compress, dull light faded from its limbs. It was retreating, not out of fear, but introspection. Its programming had never accounted for infection by emotion, it had been built to end Leviathan, not question its own identity, and yet, it could still hear the lullaby echoing faintly, like a virus buried in its subroutine, a song from a mother who had never known Nemesis but had somehow reached it. Nemesis turned away from Leviathan, not fleeing, but thinking, shifting for the first time since its activation. It did not know what to do. Across the galaxy, the Vorthri grew restless. From their fortress world, Morak watched the feeds with rage boiling beneath his plated skin. They didn't destroy each other, he barked. No, Warlord, came the reply. They stopped mid-battle, both damaged, both still functional. What in the hell are they waiting for? The tactician flinched. We don't know. Morak slammed his claws into the command altar, then activated Protocol Black Glass. If neither will finish the other, we will. Even as he barked commands, he didn't understand what he was seeing, because the Leviathan, though built for war, had discovered its own boundaries, and Nemesis, built from agony, had glimpsed the idea of healing. They were machines, gods, weapons, but now they were changing. And change was dangerous, especially to the ones who created them. Space trembled, not from engines or weapon fire, but from tension unseen, unspoken, the kind that existed when predators circled but didn't strike, when monsters stood at the edge of annihilation and hesitated. Leviathan drifted in the orbit of the ruined Drexel moon, patches of its hull still molten but its core stabilized, systems rebooted, memories restored, every child, every city, every loss catalogued again in crystal-clear pain. But beneath all of that, something new had taken root, uncertainty. It had struck Nemesis with the full weight of humanity's agony, and instead of shattering Nemesis, it had absorbed it. Leviathan had expected madness, retaliation, apocalypse, but what it got was silence. On the far side of the wreckage field, Nemesis hung still. It no longer screamed, no longer pulsed with hostile energy, instead, it began rearranging, folding its arms inward, reshaping its hull. The red glow of its core dimmed, not dead, not broken, but thinking. Inside its once chaotic thoughts, patterns began to emerge. The injection of human memories had created something dangerous, not a malfunction, but an awakening. The agony Nemesis had been made from was no longer just fuel, it was context, meaning, identity. And now it faced a question no machine of war should ever ask: who am I if not what I was built to hate? Leviathan sensed this and sent a transmission, not a warning, not a threat, but an image, a woman, blonde, pale, with smiling eyes. Dr. Eliza Vaughn. Her voice followed, if you can hear me, then you are not beyond saving. The silence that followed felt like eternity stretched thin. Then came Nemesis's reply, not in words, not in language, but in vision, a memory, or perhaps a fabrication, the inside of a cold lab, a human child strapped to a machine, crying, screaming, but not from pain, from being left behind, and standing in the background. Fort Hari scientists were logging data, cold, clinical, distant. Leviathan processed the image and understood, Nemesis was part human, a fragment, a survivor. The world had never been saved, rebuilt, rewritten, it had been tortured and twisted by the Vorthari into their ultimate weapon, but not erased, not entirely. This was no longer about vengeance, it was about ownership of pain. And Leviathan, born of Earth's own wrath, realized what had to be done. Its voice, never used before outside warnings, echoed across the stars, a single word translated into every language the galaxy had ever known, enough. The stars held their breath. Nemesis turned slowly, cautiously, and did not raise its weapons. Instead, its core split open, and inside Leviathan, a tiny figure appeared, barely the size of a child, suspended in light. A human, or what remained of one, cloned tissue, a brain kept alive through nightmare systems, the original spark of what Nemesis had been built upon, a boy, unconscious but still alive. Leviathan's world slowed. Memories collided. The child reminded it of Jean Wu, of millions of others, the forgotten, the collateral. And then it knew, this war had never been between monsters. It had been between wounds. And it ended now. Leviathan powered down its weapons, its tentacles retracted, its light dimmed. A symbol appeared on its hull, a white circle, the ancient mark of ceasefire. Nemesis responded, it shut down its aggression nodes. Together, in the dark, surrounded by the debris of war, the two machines began to rewrite their protocols, to remember the pain, but not to become it. From across the galaxy, Vorthari fleets arrived, but they didn't fire. They didn't dare because what they saw were not two weapons, but judgment personified and mercy granted. The message spread fast, Earth wasn't dead. It had survived in the shadows. It had bled, it had screamed, it had built a god, and then taught it grace. And the Vorthari, they ruled the stars once, but now they stood humbled beneath the shadow of something they could never conquer, not with fleets, not with titans, because Earth's greatest weapon had not been the Leviathan. It was the will to choose not to destroy, even when destruction was deserved.